Meeting is being recorded.
Okay. CDS UI session. We are meeting with Shadi and Sarah to go over some of the designer changes we want to support. So first thing is about workflow execution. Okay. So within workflow execution, what we support is imperative workflow. What I mean by this is that within a workflow action, you can orchestrate how the components are being executed. So you can have an orchestration, something like for an action of config deploy, I'm going to call a step of imperative workflow 1, and then once that's done, I'm going to call a step of imperative workflow 2. Okay, and this could be represented as these two steps are different components that can be executed. Or I can say for step of config assign, I will execute step 1 for config assign, and then step 2 for config assign 1, and step 3 for config assign 2. And you can see this is done in parallel, okay? And then it exits, okay? The black is the exit. So how does this look like? So let me show you in how we design this in the package. In the package, if you look at definitions of workflow, the first thing you'll see is resource assignment, config assign, config deploy, okay? And then you also, for each of these, basically have steps, inputs, and outputs, okay? And what we're describing here is how we are modeling the steps, okay, within your workflow action. So when we look at config deploy, and we look at config deploy step, within config deploy step, as part of imperative workflow, we are saying that the first step is imperative workflow step 1. The second step is imperative workflow step 2. Okay, so if you can see that what's happening is that we're saying execute imperative workflow 1, and then it's going to call the target of which component, okay? And as part of that component, if it's successful, we're going to call component 2, okay? If it fails, we also support on failure, okay? So on failure is also supported. On failure, we can call another component, okay? Say component 3. But on success, we are calling component 2, okay? And once we execute component 2, and here we don't have on success or on failure, so nothing will be done. So it just exits the flow. But the main idea here is that we want to be able to model for config deploy action, execution of step 1. Once step 1 is executed, it's going to call the target component of NF account collection. Once this component is completed, on success, it will call the next component. Or on failure, it will call component, some other component. And when it calls imperative workflow 2, that will call the target component of execute. And once it's completed, it will exit this entire config deploy step. So the way I am trying to capture that in the workflow is that these green items and red items. The green items means that for config assign step, I will call execute, and then I will call another execute 2, okay? So this is like a sequential, actually, since it's not sequential, it's parallel component execution because I have 2 arrows going to execute 1 and execute 2. Okay?
So we can have multiple components that have specific flow for each one in the same workflow?
Yes.
In the same action.
So you have, within an action, you have multiple steps, and those steps can execute components.
But I mean that, as an example in the screen you are showing here, we have multiple. I see that the config assign and execute. I mean that execute may have one flow, different flow rather than the config assign, and maybe have a connection between them or a relationship between them in case of success or failure?
Execute is a step. So let me show you again.
That can have a specific flow.
It can. I don't want to say the flow. It's a function that's executed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like an orchestration flow. It's just a specific module which call to execute and return us the output.
But we have only two stages: the success and failure.
So if you see,
we have
steps, right?
Yes.
Steps are workflow steps. So imperative workflow step 1.
Yes.
For config deploy action, we start with imperative workflow step 1.
Yes.
That will trigger target NF account collection component.
Okay.
NF account collection is part of your node template definition. Okay, NF account collection is basically a component, a reusable component of resource resolution.
What she mean? It's asking about if step 1 have many status else of success or failure. So we have success and failure. There is any more, or it's just 2 cases, success and failure only?
It's either success, failure, or it could be nothing, right? Like if we just want to execute one module, sometimes we don't even put on success. We just have it like this, nothing. But in general,
it will not go to any steps in this case?
Yeah, it will not go to any step. It just executes that component and exits.
So it will be the end, no steps after that.
That's correct.
Okay. When we go to step 2, we will have success and failure also?
For step 2, you only go if it's success. If this component is successful.
I mean, after go to step 2, we will have
no.
those options.
Step 2, you can have on success, on failure, or it can be null.
So any steps can have success or failure?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Okay, each step can be success, failure, or exit. No, yes.
Yuri, can you send us this file as long as it's different from the one we have?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it for you on the. I'm gonna put it on the CDS channel. Okay. So, and I gave 2 examples because one example, you can see how a component triggers parallel actions. So let me just show you that as well. So this way, if you look at config assign, okay, the first step of config assign, you know, is config assign, or you can call it step 1. Okay, so this is step 1. On success of step 1, I'm going to call step 2 and step 3. Okay, and you can see on success, I need to basically do a relationship. 2 instances of config assign going to 2 different components. Okay, and I have step, let's say 3 here. Step 3, step 2 and 3, right? And basically, when I execute the step, I exit. See, there's nothing. Okay, so when both of these steps are completed, I exit. Okay, so the idea here is that it basically allows us to do parallel workflow steps. Okay, you enter step 1, and then once this step is executed, then you execute step 2 and 3. Okay. Any questions on the parallel component orchestration?
No, it's okay.
Okay, so either you do sequentially or you do parallel. That's what we want to support. And the main idea that I was kind of describing to Ahmed in this picture is that I can take the green and map it, that's like on success, right? Related to, execute 1 and then execute, 2, right? So that gives me parallel, or I can do execute 1 only, and then I can take I would need to take another step in the workflow to relate execute 2 to go to another component. So,
but the success and fail, the failure will go to the component or the function, not to the success status of the other one.
Can you repeat that one more time, Sarah?
I mean the photo you just showing. I see that the direction is going to between the success and failure circles. Not this one.
On success, you
Design.
configure assign and configure assign 2.
I mean the other screen, the designer screen.
Oh, the designer screen. Okay, 1 second. What was your question about this?
This one. I see that the arrows is going from the green one to the green one.
It's going to step 2, and step 2 is success. Green, success. So then get to step 3 and then success.
I mean.
Right. So what it's saying is that one on configure assign success, it will execute.
It's not going to step it. It's going to.
Going to the status there.
Okay. She's mean green arrow from the green. It must go to card, not to step, not to green point 2.
If I made it go from component 1, and then I made another arrow to component, to inside this on success, right? On success, you're saying.
No, she's mean it's on first green point.
Yeah.
It's go to status.
The
flow, not to green point.
Can we have the example file that you are editing and just draw it in PowerPoint for the example?
Yeah.
Apply it to the example we are editing.
Okay, so this is the one, right? So I'll do config assign action. Okay, so this is our action. And the first step within the action.
That's a component or a function,
That's the action, workflow action. Okay, and it's gonna call the step. Okay, so the first thing we do is call a step, right? So what is the step? The step, let's say, is step 1. Okay, so step 1. And step 1 is gonna call the target, right? So it's related to the target of this other thing. Let's say component. We'll call it resource resolution, and it's component of resource resolution, right? And then what I'm saying is that the way I captured it is that this thing is basically has a green circle. And we also have a red circle. And the reason I did that is just represent if there's any. Okay, So, and basically what I want to say is that if this is successful, right, then I have to go to another step. Step 2. Okay, so this is one use case. Any questions here? And step 2 can also be, resource resolution. Any questions on this use case?
Still trying to understand it.
So if you read the file, the way the file is describing it is imperative workflow. Step 1 is executing target account of NF account collection. Okay, NF account collection, if you look at it, it's component resource resolution. So look at NF account collection. See, it's component resource resolution.
How he go to component resource resolution? In success, he go to step 2, right? But how he go to
1, right? Step 1 is NF account collection, which is just a component of resource resolution. Okay, but from your point, it's calling a target, right? The target is a component.
Okay.
And then once step 1 is completed, then you go to step 2 on success. Okay, and that's it, right? And step 2 is going to call it another component, another target.
Sorry, Yuri, I'm just discussing this with Shadi.
ستيب 1 واوريدي عاملها الاكشن بتاعها ان يكول الكومبوننت دي لما جو كلها وعمل سكسس فراح للستيب 2 اللي مكتوب في الكود.
ستيب 1 يطلع منها ده هو ده التارجت بتاعه. لو ده
التارجت بتاعه في ستيب 1
مش ان هو يوصل لدي. لو حصل التارجت يبقى انا الاخضر ده
يبقى هنا
في ده يطلع لي على ده او وات ايفر التاني في الفيلير هيبقى ايه. ده اللي انا بتكلم عليه.
ماشيه ازاي في
يوري.
Yeah.
The one that is making confusion here that according to what I got so far, that I see that the green and red circle should be below to resource resolution component. As long as the step 1 is targeting this one, and if successfully going to the target, he should go whether to step 2 or the other option in case of failure.
Okay, so hold on. So what you're saying is that this stuff should be here.
Yeah.
A component. But the thing is,
if he successfully going to this target, so the next step will be to go to step 2, and in case if he didn't go into if it's failure, he should go to another step.
Okay, so okay, so that's fine. So what you're saying then, step this, right? And this would just have an empty. So let me just capture one thing. So let's say there is no step 2. Let's just say there's only a step 1. If it's a step 1, it's going to be like an empty like this.
Yeah, this is showing the target. So step 1 is targeting the resource resolution, and then the next step is to check whether the connection or the target just done, whether it's successfully done or failure. So next we will check. In case of success, he will go to another step, and in case of failure, there should be another.
step 3.
He will go to the step 3.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is fine. I don't see any issues with this. Even in the use case, if I want to do parallel. So in this case, I captured
So
green.
I think
Step one and his target can be
yes,
one card.
yes. This is what the thing that that will make it more clear to include the step and the target. I think we have only one target, not multiple targets.
Yes, it's one target per step.
Okay, so why don't we include the step and the target in one?
Where do you
one
include the
box,
target?
maybe in one box, or just to show it that this is related to this step. This is the target of this step.
So this is the target, right?
Yes,
Right
but what you mean, we can make step one and target under it in one box. Merge them.
Like something like that inside of it?
Yeah, maybe this is one idea.
Okay. And then, okay, so basically this step will be inside this config assign, and this will be also inside of it, right?
I mean, including the target in the step.
But I'm saying that
Yeah.
for this entire config assign box, right?
No.
You have
I mean
target.
to include step one, and below it we will add different color, maybe different box color, maybe with the target name.
She mean in step one, in box step
Yeah,
one, we click enter and
no, he started.
okay.
Yeah.
The circle confusing.
Right. This.
So we will remove the target.
I mean, this is the target, right?
Maybe, yeah, just titling.
And then you have,
Yeah,
and then there's going to be a step two.
we'll add the status, the steps in case of the status.
Okay. And that will be also very similar, right?
Yeah, and we'll have another one for the failure step status.
Right. Okay. I mean, I'm okay. I just want to show you one more thing. The main thing here is you got the idea, right?
Yeah.
The way we design it, we can review it, but you got the idea of what the user wants to kind of achieve here. Step one, step two, or he can even say step one, and then he can also say something like this.
Can I ask about if there are a maximum number for steps?
No, right now, no.
But the design screen, how it will be fit all of these steps?
Can we zoom in and zoom out, right?
Okay.
Right, so like this as well, Sarah.
Second one should have the
Parallel
from the
Red.
from the red circle. I mean,
okay, so in this case, this is a parallel execution, or it can be a red as well, right?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so the relationship, okay, of components to components is still captured in the component itself, these relationships.
We'll have the relationship and also the status.
Right, so I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of relationships, okay? because the relationships are captured as part of the node definition.
Yuri, can you just move the title of this flow in above?
Yeah. Config assign action.
Yuri, can you go back to the designer?
Yeah.
So this whole white box is the config assign action, right?
Correct. The only thing right now you say action 1, so instead of action 1, it will be config assign action.
Yeah. So are we gonna have multiple actions, one package?
Of course.
Okay.
Tabs.
Do we have relationship between actions?
No.
Or connection?
Between actions, no. Only within within steps, within actions and components. Okay. So there is a step orchestration and a relationship of how these components are connected. This component might have a dependency on may be connected to another component. Okay. So you might have something like, you know. Like
So
this.
what is the purpose of the connection?
Say it again.
What is the purpose of the connection?
Which connection of these?
No, I mean the one with plus in the screen in the design. The connection between the steps.
The plus. The plus.
Yeah.
The plus
This
is
connection.
for the relationship, okay, within the node template. So you see here,
But they are not affecting the flow.
they're not part of the they're not part of the workflow design definition. So you see here, the only thing that's part of workflow definition is steps, inputs, and outputs.
Yes.
Okay, and the other relationships that you're referring to, they're part of the definition of the component itself. So let me give you one good example. Like we have netcomp device, okay? It's a type of netcomp device. It has capabilities, and that capability is a netcomp capability, okay? And RESTCONF capability. And what we're doing is we're using, let me show you. We're using device. Where is it? Okay, here we go. You see here, we're using the capability of RESTCONF for executing this for the node of netcomp device. So you see we have two capabilities, netconf and RESTCONF. And for the execute, there's a relationship between, it's saying that for execute, I will leverage the RESTCONF capability of the node netcomp device. So that's the relationship that we are using, is the connects to relationship. And that's the component relationship. So when we call execute target, execute component of target, right? It's going to also have it has a capability of RESTCONF, and it's going to use the node of netcomp device with the connects to relationship to execute this target. So the way it looks like, let me just give you one quick sample. It's basically saying, let's say this is execute, okay? And there's a connects to, and that connects to is using capability of RESTCONF, okay? And this relationship, let's say we'll do a circle, and that circle of let's pick a color, purple, right, represents the relationship, the connects to relationship. There could be another relationship that we can also represent in a different color. But for now, let's say that execute is connected to a REST-CONF capability, and it's a connection to connects to a relationship. Any questions on this one?
No, it's okay.
Okay. All right, so let me save this. One thing I wanted to say is that there is another implementation that I think AWS uses. So just for your reference, presentation, this is CDS. Oh, it doesn't like that, okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, you can see they have here begin, right, workflow. Then they have something approve action, so they have a something that does approve actions, and then always connects to this run script, and then there's a success or error. So there's this type of model, and then there's an end. Okay, they have a tab that does workflow orchestration. So I don't know if we want to combine. I think it makes sense to combine everything into one, like the way we have captured it here. But Ahmed also said maybe we should separate workflows, steps, modeling in a different tab as well. So I'll give you this reference as well, so you can just take a look at it, Sarah and Ahmed.
Action will be separated or steps will be separated?
No, the steps within actions. The step modeling within action can be separated. The workflow steps. That's what Ahmed said initially, but I think I prefer this design a little bit more because it tells me exactly which steps I'm executing, which component. This is probably a better way to do this than separation. But I just want to give you this reference, just FYI.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions so far? I'm going to delete this one. I think we'll stick to these. Yeah. These. Okay. Any questions on this?
No, it's okay. So far.
Okay. So I'm going to close the screen. So let's see what else we had to discuss. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do is talk about the dictionary bulk load with SDC integration. So let's see. I will bring up the. Let me bring up the latest screens. Okay. And this one doesn't work. made changes today. Okay.
Yeah, I applied the changes we discussed yesterday, but only the template mapping list view is only remaining.
Okay. So the main thing that we want to do today, we support one creation of a resource attribute at a time, right? So you can create a dictionary resource, and this is for only one, okay? So what we want to do is, instead of doing this one at a time, because there are some VNFs that can have, 1,000 resources or 100 resources. So we want to kind of have a more robust way of doing this, okay? So our idea is that if we can have one bulk load functionality where we can essentially get a list of resources from SDC for that VNF and be able to basically provide the SDC model name. And then we want to, let's say, for that SDC model name, we want to extract all the resources.
What is the SDC?
Say it again?
What is the SDC?
SDC is the service design catalog in the ONAP. We use it for topology design. And then we send basically the packages of different components across ONAP, right? Like controller, policy, and all this other stuff. What happens is that as part of the heap template onboarding in SDC, all the resource parameter files are part of SDC. And that data is essentially has all the attributes that we want to pull from to data dictionary. Instead of the user coming creating one attribute at a time, all he has to do is add the SDC model name, and then he can get a list of all the attributes.
As if we importing the.
It's like an import. Yes, it's exactly like an import. So even I can say that the user can enter SDC model name, or there's a way he can provide an import file, okay, with a list of attributes.
But we have the import option.
We have it, but it's only working for one attribute, right?
Oh, okay, I got it. So in case of importing or just creating a new one, we can add multiple models?
Multiple attributes, that's correct. Okay? So, but that's not enough, right? So once you have all these attributes, in our screens, you have to also select which capability they should support, right? So for example, I can have capability of data dictionary, I can have capability of IPAM, and all these other things, right? So essentially, there has to be some sort of resource. So I create a group. In that group, I have a list of capabilities, and then I drag the resources that I want to basically leverage those capabilities. Okay, because that capability is a template, and all resources that are part of that group will have the same set of capabilities of IP assignment, of SDNC data retrieval from MDSAL or database, and so on and so on. So the concept, let me just make sure. Maybe I'll capture it one more time here. SDC model name, right? Even I can say import file, right? The other thing, so once we do that, I'll have a list of params, of attributes, okay? So once I have the list of attributes, think of those list of attributes are just little boxes. So these little boxes here. And I can even say that, some of these boxes, let's say, they're IP assignments, right? So they'll be green. Some are naming resources, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the attributes might, be VLAN tag attributes, whatever it may be, okay? So, and then what we also have are capabilities, right? So generic capabilities. So capabilities, what are capabilities? Capabilities, I want to say, are basically, IPAM system. IPAM. And SDNC, or I can have, REST AI, or just AI, right? And so on, right? So these are different types of capabilities. So what I want to do is I want to create a group, right? And in one group, I will have IPAM capability. I'll have, let's say, SDNC, okay? And then I also have, let's say, here I'll have input and default as well. Okay, so input and default, I'll also drag and drop. And then, so this is going to be, let's say, resource 1, resource 2, resource 3, resource 4, resource 5, resource 6, 7, and resource X, right? So I can say I want for this group to have resource 1, for this group, and also this one share the same capability, and they also, this one shares the same capability. So basically, you see what I'm trying to do is I have one group, and it's kind of binding the attributes to the capability. So essentially, what it's trying to do is this source selection mapping. It's saying these are the source capabilities I will use. Okay, and I can have, let's say this is group 1. I can have group 2, right? So this is group 1. Okay, so and group 2 will have, let's say, 2 and 5 and 7, right? And in group 2, I may not have SDNC. I might have, AI, let's say. So something like this, and then I just submit it and submit for creation. And this would create all the data dictionaries that I need.
So the current mode is not fully as long as we don't have we didn't make the grouping and the capabilities.
Say it again.
I'm just comparing this with the current scenario we have for the data dictionary. It's missing the capabilities and the grouping, I think.
It's the grouping that's missing. The capabilities are sort of there. You can say this source options are your capabilities, right?
Okay.
And it allows you to drag and drop into the panel, but the grouping is not there, right? I can say we have one grouping, right? But we don't do that at the bulk level, right? So we need different set of groupings.
Can you go back to the screen, to the designer?
Yeah.
The prototype, I mean. So can you review it, the full steps of this creation? Just to sum it up.
To summarize the steps, so you provide the SDC model name. We extract, load all the parameters into the params list.
So this is for the import step only.
This is params list. You either import it or you get it from SDC model name, from SDC API.
I mean, this is only for the import option, not for creating a data dictionary.
No, creation of data dictionary is one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. This is only for loading, bulk loading. Okay. Only this is.
The thing I mean that we the current scenario for creating a data dictionary will be the same, but the difference that we need to have another scenario for the import.
I think so. Yes, yes, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking one more way of loading dictionaries.
So the importing will can you go back to the screen of the prototype? The metadata will be the same, and the changes is only for the sources.
So even I can say is that like the name is coming from SDC or from the import file. Okay, the data type is coming from all, like a lot of this information will come from the import file or from SDC model name. It's already there, so we don't need a metadata section itself. The only thing that I want is to say all these parameters and then group them to the capability so I can create these do this kind of faster.
Where we got the capabilities, we have here only the list of the attributes or the sources. Can we rename it to be the list of source list?
So this won't be really like sources. This will be source templates. Okay, it's a little bit different because when we drag and drop sources are these sources. They're like generic. Okay, let's keep it as sources for now. I have to talk to Ahmed and Shaban about this one, about how to implement this, because this may not be exactly the same thing as sources, or maybe we have to change something in this implementation to make it the same. So I'll double check with Ahmed and Shaban on this one.
Okay, we can review it after you check it with them.
Okay. So I'll call it sources, okay? Source. Or source options. Does this make sense?
I'm trying to get the idea, but maybe I'll check the recorded video again too.
Okay, no problem. Let's just add this in the bottom. Okay. So the last idea that we wanted to ensure is that mapping bulk load with SDC integration, okay? So essentially, today, 1 second. Okay. So you see here, we have upload attribute list, right? You see this?
Yes.
So one more option is for SDC. We need to add SDC from SDC itself. So we can search from SDC and not so there's two options: upload attribute list, okay, through a file, or we can provide the SDC model name and search from SDC.
So what is the scenario of selecting this third option?
This is to retrieve the parameters, the attributes from SDC itself.
So I'll once he checked this option, he need to search for the SDC file, or
there will be an API call to SDC to get all the param data.
It should be open import or automatically.
Sorry يوري I'm discussing this with Shadi. يعني هو
يعني
هيفتح له
هتفتح
حاجة
import
list.
فايل تعمل اوتوماتيكي سيرش مش احنا ما بنسيرش.
يعني أنا فاهمين هو هيروح من هناك يجيب
هيروح
من
هناك ده
اللايبراري
الباك اند انا مش هشوفه.
من الليست اللي احنا مكريتينها هناك.
اوكي بس انا يعني قصدي الستيب دي انا مش هشوفها، يعني انا بمجرد ما تشيك كده
بطلع عنين وهو
وادوس
بيجيبها
فهو
لي.
هيروح لوحده ولا انا هكتب حاجه هنا؟
ما هو ده اللي أنا بحاول أفهمه، اللي أنا فاهماه إن هو سيرش ليست مثلا اللي هي موجودة أصلا
الكلام
اللي
مش
احنا
كده،
كريتينها.
الكلام ان هو يبقى فيه اوبشن تالت في دي بوتن
أيوة ما
بس
هو
ما فيهوش بقى ليست يسيرش فيها، ما فيش الكلام ده.
بقول لك SDC هو هيروح يتشيك
ما هي الفكره بقى مين اللي هيتشيك، اليوزر ولا
لا
دايناميكلي؟
هو دايناميكلي هيروح يجيب من
ايوه
الليست
بالظبط
اللي
كده.
عنده هناك.
انا قصدي ليه ايه اللي احنا هنعمله هنا، ولا ده هيتعمل من الباك اند كذا
لا
ديفلوبمنت؟
هو ريدي بوتن زيادة
بس
تكست، ولما بدوس عليه بيفتح له الليست
ما هي بقى دي الفكره، اللي انا
أيوة
فاهمه ان هو مش
بيجيب له
هيفتح له الليست، اللي انا فاهمه ان هو اوتوماتيكلي هيروح هو يجيب من الليست لما تعمل كده، ولا احنا اللي
ما هو هيجيبها منين؟ يوري. So the third option is to select one of the SDCs we created in the data dictionary.
No. It's to get it from SDC application. It's a designer application in ONAP.
Okay, so if I select this option, what will I get? A list or what?
You'll get a list of parameters.
So a list of parameters that I should select one of them.
No, you'll you can yes, you would have to kind of select which ones you want.
So
Correct.
it's one selection.
It's a selection, correct.
I mean one selection.
No, it's a list of selections.
No, I mean he will show a list of selection, list of parameters. Sorry.
Yes.
That he can select one or multiple parameters.
That's correct.
Okay, so once he selects the parameters, what?
And we load it into this. We load all the parameters.
Okay. Okay, I got it.
Okay, and then we allow the auto mapping to happen. So the basic idea is that the user, because all the parameter data is already onboarded to SDC. The only thing we need to do is access it. Okay, using an API.
Okay. So he will select from the list of parameters the parameters he wants, and then auto mapping, then the table with the parameters and the auto mapping data will appear as the usual scenario.
That's correct. That's correct. So if I would say, so
عارف الفايل اللي هو قبلها الاكسل فايل
هي اللي
بيفتح، هي دي بس
لسه بتسلكت ولا اوتوماتيك بيجي
كذا بارامتر.
انا ما
تشيك
كنت
وخلاص.
فاكر ان هي جاست
لا
دي جزء
العربي ده يبقى متسجل.
I don't know how you want to do this. If you want to do it like where you let the user just drag and drop resources in a bucket of what he wants?
No,
Checkbox can be.
he can select.
Yeah, that's fine. Just curious, why not drag and drop in the bucket like this? So it'll be faster?
So this is only one step of a whole scenario, a whole big scenario of selection. So there will be a totally, massive steps of selection and adding and dropping.
Okay. So let me just say like this. So checkbox, and then
there is another option. We have maybe a list of like a select menu, but with checkbox to select all the parameters, and there will be below it the list of the selected parameters, and he can uncheck or remove it from the list, or maybe move. Maybe move from and to.
right. I'm okay either way. The main point is if it makes the process to do this faster, right?
But one thing, Yuri, if you select this one, are we gonna keep the list after the auto mapping?
Can you say that again?
I mean, if he select to choose from a list of parameters.
Yeah.
And then he clicked the auto mapping. Shall we keep the selected list appear and he can edit it again, or just?
No, you don't need to keep that list. That list only comes in as part of the initial creation.
And if you wanted to change the selection?
You can do that inside within this screen itself, right? Because this screen, right? This auto mapping screen is also an editor screen, right? It's not just a display screen. The user should be able to add additional parameters if he wants to, or delete or change. This is an editor.
So the removing will be from the table, but the adding will be to go back to the same step and reselect new parameters.
You can do that as well. But if you do reselect new parameters, do you lose everything, or do you? Because if he does re-add, you have to kind of do a comparison and see what is already selected, right? And then allow the users to unselect it, or or select new ones.
I'll figure a simple scenario for the editing and the editing.
Okay. Okay, so that's the main idea. These three main ideas here.
Are these ideas for the Frankfurt iteration?
It probably won't make Frankfurt. We would like the workflow to make it. Okay, workflow is what we want for Frankfurt. The other things, as long as we have it for designer, if it doesn't make it for Frankfurt, it's okay. We can do it for the G release. But we like to get the design. If we can finalize that design, I can see if there are resources available to execute this work. If we're good with this, I'll send this out.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, Sarah? Shadi?
No.
All right. Let me stop recording.